Now, farmers have certainly been hailed for continuing to plough on through the COVID-19 lockdowns. They managed to ensure food security around the entire country. But what about the actual farm workers? I'm talking about the ones that did the actual ploughing in the fields. Now, many of them are facing eviction. Carmen Louw from Women on Farms joining us this morning. Let's find out why this is actually happening. Carmen, hello to you. So what has actually changed? Why are we hearing about possible evictions on farms around the country? It was one of the industries that was at least keeping the country going and keeping people employed. Good morning.
Good morning. Evictions is always looming for farm dwellers and farm occupiers. With the national state of disaster, there's been a temporary relief because no evictions could take place during this time. But in one municipality in particular, all over the Western Cape and the country, they face farm evictions. But the eviction hotspot is Drakensberg municipality. And in 2018, 20,000 people faced evictions according to the court rolls. So some of those evictions has been processed but couldn't be effected because of the national lockdown. And now people, once this comes to an end, the sheriff will start implementing those eviction orders.
Carmen, please forgive the ignorance. I'm afraid I don't know much about the farming sector to this sort of detail. Why are we seeing thousands? Why does it seem to have, I'm getting the impression that this is fairly normal in the farming industry. Why are we expecting retrenchments and evictions on farms?
Well, as I explained, there's the outstanding orders that's been granted that will now be effected, but there's now also an increase in new cases and illegal evictions. And part of the reason is, while normal cases, widows who are now without husbands, also there's been other kinds of development on agricultural land. We see the rise of high-cost country living estates. So all those people are being removed from farms. And then there's also just retrenchments, farmers claiming that they cannot afford the cost. But if we look at the income of the wine industry, it's billions that they've made even during the lockdown and alcohol ban season.
So what is your organisation hoping to do? You're saying thousands of eviction applications due to be processed now off the back of the state of disaster being lifted. Where do you begin taking on this fight? What are you hoping to achieve here?
Well, we hope government from national to municipalities will step in, and we hope that President Cyril Ramaphosa will declare a temporary moratorium on all farm evictions until there's proper mechanisms in place to deal with the looming crisis.
Because I would have imagined, like any business that's going through some kind of retrenchment, a Section 189, or in this case, it's the evictions, which is not just the jobs of the farm workers, it's also the roofs over their heads, that there would have been some kind of due diligence in place. Because you're mentioning, for example, the wine farms. There's a lot of money being made, but we're still seeing people losing jobs and being evicted. What is the processes in place for due diligence on these farms? Is there anything?
Well, it's not only about due diligence. There's obviously the laws being followed in some cases where ESTA, the Farm Evictions Act, is applied. But it's also a structural problem where the control, especially in the Western Cape, commercial land largely belongs to farmers. And until we see proper land reform and land redistribution, farm workers and farm dwellers will get the shortest end of the stick. And so that's why we want government to step in and fast-track land redistribution to farm workers and farm dwellers to deal with the landlessness of farm workers and dwellers.
How far or how close do you think we are as far as government doing exactly what you want them to do? What's the sticking point? What's the red tape? Our president told us there's a red tape team that we've now got in place. So how far or how close are we to this?
Well, we hear about different policies, but when it comes to implementation, there's lack of implementation, and there's also unequalness before the law, because farmers can afford expensive attorneys and advocates, whereas farm dwellers and farm workers often don't have that kind of legal support. So once implementation takes place, farm workers are often not properly supported and represented and lose out on these things.
And you were mentioning one particular municipality, Carmen, that's an issue, is Drakenstein municipality. Why? What's happening there? Because I have heard these reports before. I don't quite know the area geographically. What seems to be the biggest issue there?
Well, it is in the Cape Winelands district. It is the most densely populated area. So you also find more farm workers there than any of the other areas in the municipality, in the district municipality. So that's why there's more evictions, and the municipalities' norms and standards of dealing with evictions and providing alternative accommodation is very shoddy. And that's why we want them to come to the table and also develop a proper integrated spatial framework plan that will not create poverty slums and informal settlements when these evictions are effected.
Just before I say goodbye to you, Carmen, I want to make sure we understand the kind of devastation this leaves a farm-working family with. When we say that thousands may be left homeless, if someone were to be evicted, are there, in your experience, at least opportunities for them to find work elsewhere, or do we literally end up in a situation where someone has no roof over their head for them and their children?
They have no roof over their head, and they're also placed in rural townships, or find a location in rural townships, which means they are far away from the farms. There's no proper public transport to farms, which means there's no income, families are split apart, and there's just an increase of devastation and social crime.
We're going to stay on top of this story as well. Thank you for bringing it to our attention this morning. Carmen Louw from Women on Farm saying thousands of farm workers are now going to be evicted because of eviction applications that are waiting to be processed. Not done because of the state of disaster. The irony is the farming sector was one of those who still did quite well during COVID-19, but now thousands of workers and their families could very well be left homeless.